Like the investment side, I know I've been following your stuff on LinkedIn, and side is fun. My thing is you need a lot of resources to really build out the true, like the best trade. The best trading app is going to, I'll put in, here's how much I'm willing to risk, here's how much I have, here's what I can't lose, what I can lose, right? I mean, maybe a little more complicated than that, but and then give me the best return that you can, right?
Yeah.
And that's it. And then it takes that and then it figures out strategies. And I think that to do that, I think I genuinely think that that's going to take a lot of, it's a lot of input, right? And training. And, then you build in some agentic layers with the supervisory layer. And then I think, and then maybe at the end, it still has a human for now that, signs off on it. But it's like, I do think, I mean, because not one portfolio manager has consistently, since their start, always beat the S&P, right? Yeah. And I forget what it is like S&P beats them, if you take any 20-year period of time, S&P wins.
Yeah.
Downside, right? So if you're in a, decumulation strategy, yes. Are there ways that you can mitigate upside, maybe a little downside if you could mitigate so you're in an S&P strategy, but when things are correcting, you know how to pull out fast and then you push back. So it's more of that kind of exposure risk. I think that's where you could beat it, because it really is, the market's going to crash, right? Okay, great. So if you can pull money out a little bit, when you get to a high, all-time high or at a high, pull out 5%, 10%, right? And then wait, and I'd be kind of curious to see if there is a way, because obviously you can historical, look to see does that work, because Waddell and Reed, Waddell funds used to do that where they kept, I think, between 2 to 5% in cash, and they used to buy on dips, right? And it was a great strategy, but they were one of the few funds that had that kind of a cash reserve, but it worked, and so that was back when I started. I don't know what they do now. I doubt it, but something like that could be kind of interesting, right? It's like, Mark's coming down. Okay, good. Pull it, right? That's out. And then all of a sudden, all right, it's at the bottom or close near. Okay, put it back in the S&P, something along. Now, obviously, you're going to have taxable implications in that. I mean, if you're going to non-qualified account, but still, but that, I mean, literally, that would be the extent of of it. And I think it's just mitigating downside, right? Because I don't think you're going to outperform, um, you can play and try and build these strategies, but I don't know. I've yet to see anything that's like consistently, right? Right. So that's the thing. It's like everyone's looking for the get rich piece, and it's like you're never going to find it, fundamentals are where it's at. So I'd be kind of curious, like, what they're trying to ban inside, well, congressional trading, right? Which is insider trading. I do think, I mean, granted, we haven't had those periods in a while. We
Mhm.
used to have a lot of those volatility, right? We don't
Mhm.
have volatility so much anymore. I mean, but I mean, you'd build in a Trump tariff equation, but that's already even going away, because they're like calling bullshit on it. So I think I do think when you see a market go into correction or whatever, so if you're looking to build a platform or do something that for like your age and younger, right? Like, hey, if I can put $100 away, $500 away, and just don't even worry about it. Just here, I a machine, $500, and it does everything for me. I generally think like that's the model to use. Like index,
Exactly.
your fees are basically damn near zero. And then if there is a way that in course correction, that you keep a reserve and you just keep buying, so I think that's the way to do it, I generally do. Every
Yeah,
time
I
there's a
agree with you. And that's what I do. Like that's what I actually do, like for personal finances, right? It's just when you that's what you said, like it's the only machine that I think works. Like you put money in index and you forget about it and then that's it. Like
That's
you
it.
don't do it.
Yeah, if you want to invest in something that controls your emotions so you don't feel like you need to pull it out, right? So you
Yeah.
don't emotionally invest, so that's the only thing. I mean, that's honest where behavioral science comes into play, and it's so funny.
I'll take it back to to the first point that you mentioned, which is the advisors that are working are not doing it on a personal level, are not doing it on a human level, right?
Yep.
And that's where you have all of these situations of, do people understand that you need to invest in something like index
Yep.
funds so that you have a machine that works? Do you understand like your situation when you have money, when you don't have money, how you deal with this? Do you understand how to deal with, like you said, with insurance? Do you understand that um, you need to have some form of financial understanding of your situation to decide what you need to do and all of that?
If you poll 100 of your friends, right, what's the biggest thing that they worry about?
Managing their money, they don't understand money, right? Like
Right.
it's all of
They,
these questions. Yeah.
yeah, competing priorities day to day. They work their butts off, but yet they feel like they don't have enough, right? I mean, and it's like, so it's those conversations, right?
Like from from a general like aspect, uh, like you said, what are people like usually
Well,
worried about?
I
They're
think,
worried about like they're scared of money. They maybe have financial trauma. They maybe have inherited beliefs about around money, maybe about their identity. And
see, and I
for,
think each of those are good, right? It's just like, and then I should be saving. How do I keep with inflation? All the
yeah,
problem is, or I need to goal planner. Those are all like, it's like fundamentals, but at the end of the day, that's not really what's going on in their head. What's going on in their head is like, I'm working my ass off. And why do I feel like I'm not getting ahead or I don't know where I'm at and I feel lost, right? It's I think a lot more simple than that for a lot of people. I generally do, right? Because I think, well, those are all subsets of it, right? And most when you go to talk to someone, well, the first thing is you got to get clear on where you're at. Then you got to, it's like, okay, yeah, I know that, but it's like they hear it, but they don't know it. And it's like they're listening, but they're not understanding. And why? Because they're caught in that moment of like, shit, I'm working my ass off, yet each month I'm barely getting by, right? And I make 150, 200, whatever it is, right? I had a friend that made $500,000 a year that was going into overdraft each month. So it's like, what happens is your income goes up, so do your expenses, right? And so you don't live a better life. You just live a more expensive life. And that's unfortunately what it is. It's like, I remember when my partner and I got together, we'd go and Queens and we'd eat at one of the little places and, a meal for two of us was $50, right? $40, right? Now when we go out, shit, we went to dinner last night, the night before last, it was 250, right? So now, is the 50 to 250 food that big of a difference? No. It's just where you go, the location. It's just times have changed. So there's all those things that come into play. But to go from 50 when we met 13 years ago, 12 years ago to 250, it's a big difference. Quite frankly, the $50 meals actually
or
taste
better.
better in a lot of ways, right? But this is an example, right? And it's you're stressed, something's missing, something's disconnected, like, and I don't feel like, okay, well then why don't you feel that way? And so it's just like, look, the piece is not to feel good or bad, guilty or not around doing something. The point is to get clear, and it's like, it's funny when I have conversations with people and they say, all right, when were you your happiest? And they'll tell me about a time. And I'm like, all right, did you have a lot of money then? No. Buddy of mine that was one of my Web3 CTO buddies. He's got a couple million. He put in crypto when he was working. That's how he got paid, and he could retire, right? But he's like, well, I don't know. And I'm like, all right, when were you happiest? And he would tell me, I'm like, all right, did you have money? He goes, no, we were broke. Exactly. And so the pieces, the splitting money and happiness is so essential. And the problem is we buy material things to fill something. We buy material things to feel something, right? It's either fill or feel, right? To fill a void because we didn't get it or whatever, or to feel a certain way. I want to feel better, right? It goes back to social desirability bias, right? It's like, he wants to look good, right? And so, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the thing is, there's a trade-off, and that's the piece that there's always a trade-off, right? And anytime you spend money, there's a trade-off. And it's to realize that that's okay. But what's more important to you? It's all relative. And if you can think of it in that way, is when you make decisions, there's always a scale. And when you do something here, something's going to give. You cannot, I mean, unless you're stupid wealthy, right? Then it's like, okay. But for the, and I think that's the piece. We all want to think we're stupid wealthy or be stupid wealthy. And most of us will never get there. So then we try to buy our way there in image, and that's a problem. And, but there's a scale. And I think that's the piece. You see where I'm like, it's
Yeah.
literally that simple. It's
Yeah.
not, I need to save more. I need to spend less. I need to goal plan. I need to do my budget. It starts there because that's where the conversation really goes.
See, always learning from you, Brian.
No. So that whole conversation, right? If that's where it starts, right? And I think, and then it's like, all right, so then when you have that, then what do you do? And then that's where you can start to block and tackle and like, all right, let's look at first thing is like, you know, figuring out why you want to make the change, before you do anything. It's like, okay, what's the reason? Is it pain or pleasure? It's really kind of the simplest thing. Not because I should, because I need to, because that's not going to connect. I mean, it's like, what's the, what change you wanted to make, or you just wanting to see where you're at and get a snapshot, but just getting really clear with it. Because if you start saying, I want to make all these changes, but you're not really committed to it, then you're going to start setting up patterns and habits that you give up. And then you're like, it's like going to the gym 3 times and then like, oh, that's it, I quit. Right. And that does happen, right. Because you're not going to see your results or things like that. So that's where ideally it's like, all right, you know what? I hate being stressed like this. I need to feel better about it. Great. All right. So then let's put it together. Right. And then it starts with first thing is just getting accounting, how much you make and where does it go? Looking at where every dollar is spent, right? And there's so many apps now that do a good job of that you can just input, like Mint used to be, input all your information and it shows you here's where your money goes. If you make $5,782 last month, I want to know where $5,782 goes. And sometimes it's actually not 5,782, it's actually 6,310 because you're using your credit cards to make purchases above, and then you're actually just paying the minimum. So you're thinking, oh, I'm paying my credit cards, but you're making the minimum pay. So those are the things. So it's like, that's what you want to do. And just, again, and there's no judgment, no right or wrong, no beat up, but just check it, track it. And if you can you need at least 3 months history. Ideally, if you could do 6 months, that would be great, or a year. I mean, now with these things, it's so easy to show. Almost every bank has a budgeting app too, so that makes it easy, So I think that to me is like that's where you start. And then it's like, all right, having an honest conversation with yourself as far as where does my money really go? And don't lie to yourself. Be real. It's like, listen, I'm living up outside of my means. I'm spending more than I make. I'm, whatever it is, and just having a real conversation. That's it. And then from that point, then it's easy. Then it's like, all right, what do you want to do? And then it's like looking at, all right, what needs to change, and it's like, and then why? And it's just kind of what breaking it down to, all right, so if you're going out to eat all the time, spending 250, it's like, okay, why change? And I love to do that. I'm like, all right, why change? Well, because I want to save more. Yeah, right. Why? And it does take that sometimes because like it's not you're convincing me, you're convincing yourself, right? And when you screw up, which you will, because no one's perfect, how do when you get off track, how do you get back on track, right? So you're gonna fall. Everybody breaks down, something goes wrong. It's just, but what's your plan for when you do it? How do you do it? So those are the simple pieces. And then it's just figuring out, then from there, it's a simple setting a budget, like the first thing is that's the expense. Then it's like, all right, so I go out to eat 4 times a week. What am I willing to trade off and why? Once you get that dialed in, all right, I'm gonna do it 2 times a week. Great. You can't go from 4 to 0. You can't go from 4 to 1. It's kind of like quitting smoking or whatever. You can't just, all of a sudden, very few people can do
Cold
that, right?
turkey.
I'm not
Yeah.
drinking and then tomorrow after they've been drinking for 10 years. You got to wean off. And so how do you do that, right? It's like, what is your Nicorette or whatever the nicotine patch is, help get you off. And that's sometimes where it's an accountability buddy for the first 90 days that, checks in every 2 weeks and once a month, and I always give people, you got 4 weeks to lock it in. So we're going to track on a weekly basis. These are the numbers you set for you, not me. They're your numbers. So you have to decide can you keep them or not. And so let's check in every week. Did you exceed it? Not, or hit it? What was the deal every week? After 4 weeks, it's locked in. Now you will start getting judged, right? Because you're the one that's setting it. It's like you say this and you're doing, it's like you have to follow through. And so those are fun things, right? Like that's where it starts. Before any investments, before anything, it has to start there.
Yeah. And when you're talking about the big purchases and the material purchases, like for me, this is like you said, this is sometimes a psychological decision more than anything.
It
And
really is.
right. And did you have it always innate? Like, did you always like question the the value or the relevance of a major material purchase, or is that something that you used to spend money on in the past and then you learned how to
What do you mean?
um
I still do.
yeah.
See, that's the thing. It doesn't change.
Mhm.
People don't change. I still have the same thing. When I'm feeling down, when I feel whatever, I want to go buy something. That's natural. That's human nature, right? I mean, and that's like nothing changes. That's just, I just am consciously aware of it. People think that you're just going to change and you're all of a sudden, it's like working out. I say I love it. Most of the time it's to convince myself, not to convince other people. There's days I hate it and I'm miserable, but I still drag my ass there, and so that's the piece. It's like that still is there, I still like to go do stuff, right? And it's like that's normal. That really is normal. And I think that's the piece is like, yeah, I'm not speaking from coaching, I'm speaking from experience, right? I've lived a lot of this and I've seen this, right? So it's like, and it's perfectly natural. Humans are emotional creatures. We're irrational, we're illogical. That's great. So, so let's stop the bullshit and let's just like, that's who we are, right? It's like, and so that's the thing, like a budget's not always fluid, like there's going to be some days you're going to want to blow it. Then, all right, so then what's the trade-off, right? That's okay, you know? So, but I think that's the piece. It's like, quit beating yourself up, quit trying to be like everybody else. It's like, this is your own internal battle. No one else. No one's got the secret. Everybody's like, oh, well, this is what I did. And there's the steps, right? That's a small part of it. There's a billion steps out there, right? You want to save, there's the paying down debt, the snowball effect. There's the paying down the highest interest. There's the paying down what it's like. There's all these different. That's the what to do, right? That's like the gym equipment, right? Whether it's a flat bench with a bar, dumbbells, or a machine, all three of them are going to build your chest. Yes, there's schools of thoughts on which one's better, which one's what. But then also, if you've got bad shoulders, we don't want to use a bar. You want to, so it's like that's the piece is one is not better than the other. They all do the same. Same thing with this, you know, and that's the difference. And I think that's the piece where we don't spend time on because everyone's an expert. That's what I know what's best. I'm like, I don't know what's best. The older I've gotten, yeah, when I was young, when I was leading teams early on, yeah, I knew what was best. I don't anymore because it doesn't matter what I know. It matters what are you going to use? And it's like what you may use is complete opposite of what I say. Great. If that works for you to get you to where you want to go, I'm perfectly okay with it. If you want to do little jars and put quarters at what, or if you want to, it's like I'm perfectly fine with that. And I think that's the piece where it's like, I don't know how, that's why I get so frustrated with all these different financial coaches and all that other stuff, because it's like everyone's got, and what it is that's how they sell their wares, right? It's like that's how they sell themselves. And I get it, they absolutely have to do that. But at the same time, it's like, if that really was the case, again, why aren't we doing better? And that's always the question I have, if that makes sense.
That's a very important question. Why aren't we doing better?
Why aren't we doing,
100%.
you know, if somebody figured this out, why aren't we doing better?
Damn.
you know?
That's a very good rhetorical question. Do you have an answer for it?
Yeah, I do. And that is that because we don't know. And we really don't like, we're not doing better because again, humans are emotional, we're illogical, and there is not one size fits all. And there isn't. I mean, there genuinely isn't, and so I think that's the piece, and that's okay. And it's like that doesn't make it bad. It just makes it what it is, if that makes sense.
It does. It does.
Yeah. That's it. It literally is that simple. It's like,
This is awesome, Brian. I don't know if you, but these are like, you've been spitting gems for like 20 minutes now. So,
at the end of the day, we live our life based on the money we make, and it's like, and we go to work, and most jobs that we're in, like you can't change your salary, can you? You're fixed. You can't work overtime and get paid more. You do work overtime, but you don't get paid
look at
more.
it.
So you're kind of stuck. And so you've got, options. You can get a different job, ask for a raise, you could get a promotion. So there's things that you can do, but a lot of times, well, there's not, and so then what do? Then you move over to the other side and it's like, all right, where's my money going? And it's just having those conversations. And I do think that we need more of that, but